How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Beis, Daf 82 of Masechta Gittin. Friends, today we're starting the ninth parak, the ninth and final parak of Masechta Gittin. We talk about some relatively interesting stuff. Alright, so we're going to start the Mishnah on Daf Pei Beis, Amud Aleph, at the beginning of the ninth parak. So if you have a fellow who divorces his wife and he says to her, you're divorced and you're permitted to everybody. Ela lefloni. Now the question is, what does this mean? Does this mean except for Ploni, or you're divorced from everybody under the condition that you never marry Ploni? Okay, we're gonna have to see. But somehow there seems to be some thing about Ploni that she can't marry him. Rabbi Eliezer matir, but Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, that's an acceptable get, no problem. Just stay away from Ploni. Whereas the Chacham said, no, you can't do that. Kate said, yeah, so what do you do? So if he gives his wife the get, right, and he says, so now what do you do? So you'd so take it back from her, and give it back, right, take it back from her and then give it back to her. And say to her the second time around, full stop, and say, you are permitted to everybody, full stop. Now, if they wrote it inside, they hard-coded into the text of the document that you got to stay away from Ploni, well then forget about it. You got to rewrite the get. You can't just erase that bit. You got to rewrite the whole thing. Now, Ibailu, so the Gemara asks a kasha, Hi Ella chutzu o amanasu. So when it says Ella in the get, right, that it says, or when he gives it at least, he says, Hariyat mutaris l'chol adam Ella lefloni. Does that mean except for Ploni, right? Is he saying you're permitted to everybody except so and so, which means that it's not a full divorce, it's not a clean break, because it's not complete, it's not total, because there's an exception, right? Right? There's a provision carved out that she's not divorced vis-a-vis Ploni. So is it chutzu except for Ploni, or amanasu? Or does it mean, no, you're divorced from everybody under the condition that you never marry Ploni? So it's like a little bit of a dance, but like you're divorced, you're fully divorced, but you're only fully divorced as long as you don't marry Ploni. So chutzu, so do we say it's except for Ploni? Uvechutzu the pligei rabbanon, and that's why the rabbis say that you can't do this. The rabbis argue in Rabbi Eliezer, deha shi'ir la beget. It's not a total divorce, right? He's leaving over from the complete separation, right? It's only it's almost the complete separation, but it's not complete because it excludes Ploni, who vis-a-vis Ploni, she's not divorced. But if it's saying that, but in the case of you are divorced under the condition that you never married Ploni, well then maybe the rabbis would say that's okay. Modile, they would admit and agree with Rabbi Eliezer. It's just a condition. We know that you can make a condition by a divorce. Right? You're divorced under the condition that you give me 200 zuz. We said that was acceptable. So here also, you're divorced, right? The rabbis would say, that's fine. You're divorced under the condition that you never married Ploni. That's okay. But you cannot say you're divorced except with regard to Ploni. O Dilma, or perhaps Almanashu, or maybe, no, Dafka, we are talking about Almanas. Uva Almanasu, the Polig Rabbi Eliezer Darbanon. And specifically by Almanas, under the condition, that's where Rabbi Eliezer is willing to say that it's a kosher get. Aval b'chutz. But if it's except for Ploni, well then Rabbi Eliezer would agree with the rabbis that it's unacceptable to ashir la beget, because he's leaving over, right? It's not a clean break because the get is nothing vis-a-vis Ploni. Omar Ravina, so Ravina comes to answer this kasha about, does Ella mean except for Ploni, or does it mean under the condition that you never married Ploni? So Tashma, come in here. Kolabatim mitamen b'negoyim, that all homes are capable of getting, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, getting tsaras, are capable of getting tsaras of ich weiß nicht. Ella shel ovdei kochavim. Ella ovdei kochavim. So again, so what does this mean? Ella ovdei kochavim. I almight bishlama. Contracting is the word I was looking for. All houses are capable of contracting tsaras. Ella shel ovdei kochavim. I almight bishlama chutz hu shapir. Okay, so if it means chutz mi ovdei kochavim, so all Jewish houses can contract tsaras, but non-Jewish houses don't get tsaras. Well, okay, great, fine. So all houses except for shel ovdei kochavim are able to contract tsaras. Eli omet al menasu, but if you say it's on condition, then what the heck is it talking about? Al menas de lo mitamu bate ovdei kochavim ud mitamu bate Yisrael. What, that under the condition that the ovdei kochavim houses don't become tamei, only then can the Jewish houses become tamei. Ha mitamu bate ovdei kochavim lo mitamu bate Yisrael. But if the bate of the kochavim can become tamei, so then the houses of the Yidden don't. Like, what does that mean? V'od bate of the kochavim mitame, right? And the houses of the kochavim don't contract tum in the first place. V'atanya, as we learn in the Brisa, v'nasati nega tzaras b'beis eretz achuzaschem. Right, there will be tzaras in the house of achuzaschem, your inheritance. Eretz achuzaschem mitame b'negoyim. V'im bate of the kochavim mitame b'negoyim. Only your inheritance is mitam ben goyim, but not bate of the kochavim. So if we say that Mishnah which says kol abate mitam ben goyim ella shel of the kochavim, if we say that it means almanas, it makes no sense. So therefore it must mean chutz mi bate of the kochavim. So shmamina chutzu shmamina. So we see that ella means chutz, and therefore in our Mishnah as well, when it says amagayis jes isto v'amula ariad mutaris l'chol adam ella lefloni, means chutz mi ploni, and we're saying that is where. That is where the rabbis say that it's not allowed, because it's not a clean break. Okay, fine. So our Mishnah, therefore, which we're saying means chutz, right? Chutz mi ploni. So it's not like the following brisa. The Tanya is learning a brisa. Reb Yossi. Reb Yehuda lo nechleku Reb Eliezer v'chacham ala megarish es ishto v'omer lo hariat muteris l'chol adam chutz mi ploni. That if a fellow says that you are permitted to everybody chutz mi ploni except for ploni, so says Reb Yossi Reb Yehuda, everyone would agree there she'ena migoreshes, that she is not divorced. Amanechleku, where's the machlokas? Ala megarish es ishto v'omer lo hariat muteris l'chol adam amanas shelo tinas l'ploni. Where they argue is if a fellow says you are divorced and you're permitted to everybody under the condition that you never marry Ploni. That's where the machlokas is. Rabbi Eliezer matir l'chol adam chutz meoso ish. Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, she's permitted to everybody except for that, for Ploni. The chacham osim, but the chacham say it's not allowed. My time with Rabbi Eliezer, how come Rabbi Eliezer says it's okay? Midi dehava hakol tanai da'alma. Well, it's just a tanai. It's just a condition. You're permitted to everyone under the condition that you don't marry Ploni, and that's fine. Whereas the rabbis say, while we understand that you can make a condition with a get, but this is not a condition you can make, because it effectively means that she's not fully divorced, because she's not allowed to marry whoever she wants, because she's not allowed to marry Ploni after all. So we see that in this brisa, we're saying that when it comes to chutz, everyone agrees that that's not allowed. The machlokas is davka by almanas, whereas our Mishnah, we said, is talking about chutz, and we're saying that that's where we have machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and the chachomim. Okay, fine. So our Mishnah is not like that, brisa. Alright, I just babble yawned. I was trying to babble yawn off camera, but I missed the button, so I bet I'm just babble yawned on camera. Sorry. Umasnisin de ukimna bechutz, my time Rabbi Eliezer. Oh, so maybe some of you were wondering. We said that our Mishnah is talking about chutz, right? That you're permitted to everybody except for Ploni. How could Rabbi Eliezer possibly say that that's acceptable? I mean, it's clearly not a clean break. You're permitted to whoever you want, just not so and so. So that's not a clean break. So masnizin du kimna b'chutz. My time is Rabbi Eliezer. How come Rabbi Eliezer says that that's acceptable? That you're permitted to everybody except for Ploni. Rabbi Yanai mishum zokinechot. So it says Rabbi Yanai from a certain elder. Omar Kra, that the pasuk says, all right, Babylon. Okay, I think that was the Babylon that I needed to do before. And okay, hopefully I got that out of the system. That on my cross, the pasuk says, "V'yotzu mi beiso." Okay, that when a woman gets divorced, she leaves the house of the husband. V'holcha v'hoyso li'ish acher, and she will go and be to another man. Afilu lo atitira ela li'ish acher. Even if the first husband only permitted her with regard to even just one fellow, she is divorced. So even if the divorce is only, only makes her permitted to just one person, Rabbi Eliezer would say that is already considered acceptable. So certainly in this case where she's permitted to everybody except for Ploni, that's fine. For Rabbanan ha'ish l'chol ish va'ish. Whereas the rabbis say no. When it says ish acher, it means any ish acher, right? Meaning, right, that she has to be permitted to marry whoever she wants. Any individual ish, any individual fellow should be free game for her, should be available for her for marriage. And therefore, and that's not acceptable if you say except for so-and-so. Reb Yochanan Amar, says Reb Yochanan, gives an alternative explanation for Reb Eliezer. Time of Reb Eliezer me'achal. The reason for Reb Eliezer is from here. V'isha grusha me'isha lo yukachu. It says by a kohen that a kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee, a grusha. And it says v'isha grusha me'isha lo yukachu. They can't marry a woman who's divorced from her husband. Afilu lo nizgasha ela me'isha. Even if she's only divorced from her husband. Meaning if he says, you are divorced from me and you are not permitted to anybody else. Right, what does Rashi say? It says, I'm on the third line of Rashi, and you're not permitted to anybody else. So even though that's not, an acceptable divorce, at least not according to the Chacham, but nifsla min hakahuna. She's not allowed to marry a kohen anymore. Even though she's not actually divorced because she's not permitted to anybody, but that's not what's called reach haget, a scent of a get. And she's not allowed to marry a kohen because of it. Alma avegita. So Rabbi Eliezer wants to argue that even though it's effectively doesn't help her out much, it just divorces her from her husband, but doesn't make her permitted to anybody else. But still, she's not allowed to marry a kohen. I guess if he's a kohen, let's say, so she wouldn't be able to remarry him, maybe. So Alma avegita. So we see that apparently it is technically a kosher get because it has some kind of nafkamina. So Rabbi Eliezer wants to argue that even if she's not permitted to anybody, it's technically still get. Rabbanan Isser Kuna Shani, whereas Rabbanan say no, it's not a kosher get, but we're particularly stringent when it comes to Kohanim. When it comes to Kohanim, we're very stringent with who they can marry, and even in this case, when it's just a reach haget, she would not be able to marry a kohen. But it's not a kosher get according to the rabbis. Boy, Rabbi Abba asks a kasha, but kiddushin eich. Now, how does this apply to kiddushin? Right, we're saying that by gerushin, right, by divorce, if he says you're permitted to everybody, just not Ploni, so Rabbi Eliezer says that's fine. The Chachamim say it's not fine. So what about by kiddushin? If he says Hayat mikudeshes li, what does Rashi say? He says 4 lines into the thin lines. Hiskadshi li le'asu l'chol adam chutz mi Ploni. Right, that you are betrothed to me, you are mikudeshes to me, and you are also to everybody else, right? You are betrothed to me, you're forbidden now to everybody else, except for Ploni. Ploni is still permitted to you. So by Rabbi b'kiddushin eyach. So how does this machlokas play out when it comes to kiddushin? Tibar Rabbi Eliezer, Tibar the Rabbanon. You can ask this kasha both with regard to Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon. What would Rabbi Eliezer say by kiddushin? What would the Rabbanon say by kiddushin? Tibar Rabbi Eliezer, you can ask what would Rabbi Eliezer say by kiddushin? Ad kan lo kam Rabbi Eliezer hocho. The only reason why Rabbi Eliezer says by gerushin, by divorce, that it's acceptable if he says that you're permitted to everybody except for Ploni, because there are psukim. Right? We just quoted 2 possible psukim that would teach us that it's acceptable to say that you're permitted to everybody except for so-and-so. Aval hosam, kinin ma'ayo ba'inon. But I can argue that Rabbi Eliezer would say that when it comes to kiddushin, however, where we don't have those psukim, so then you would need a proper kinyan, i.e., you're betrothed to me, and therefore you're also to absolutely everybody else. Or perhaps, right, there's a concept of makish havoya liyitzia, that we compare the kiddushin to the gerushin, and therefore, just like by a get, it's acceptable to say you're permitted to everybody except for so and so. So also by kiddushin, it would be permitted to say you're also to everybody except for so and so. So that's the shaila. What does Rabbi Eliezer say by kiddushin? Does he say that it would have to be absolute, that everybody's usher upon you, or do we compare Kiddushin to Gittin and say it's okay if you say that there's still somebody who's permitted to you even after the Kiddushin? We can also ask the same kasha according to the rabbis. What would they say by Kiddushin? Maybe the rabbis only say by Gittin that you cannot say because you need a clean break, and that would not be a clean break. But maybe by Kiddushin, at least as long as it's as long as it's some form of a kinyan, right? You are mikudeshes to me, you're asur to everybody, you're still permitted to just one person, but otherwise, it's Kiddushin. So maybe that's enough. Or maybe, again, we compare Makish, Avoy, Liyitzia, we compare Kiddushin to Gerushin, and just like by Gerushin it would have to be complete, so also by Kiddushin it would have to be complete. And then after Abba asked the kasha, he answered it, both according to Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis, Makish, Avoy, Liyitzia, we compare Kiddushin to Gittin, and therefore Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is the same by Gittin and Kiddushin. The Rabbanon's opinion is the same by Gittin and Kiddushin. Rabbi Eliezer would say that by Kiddushin, if you say you are forbidden to everybody, you're mikudeshes to me and forbidden to everybody except for so and so, Rabbi Eliezer would say that is okay. The Rabbanon would say, it has to be you're mikudeshes li and you are asura on absolutely every other fellow. Omer Abaye. So now Abaye gets into an interesting, territory. Yevamis shtickle. Nothing mind-blowing. Shtickle Yevamis. Omer Abaye says Abaye. Imtim Salomar. If you want to say Isa l'Rab Abba, so says Abaye, if we're saying like Rab Abba, that Rabbi Eliezer says that by Kiddushin, it's acceptable to say, Hayat Mikudeshes li, Hayat Asur, what is it? Hayat Asur l'chol Adam chutz mi ploni. Rabbi Eliezer says that it's acceptable for a fellow to say that you are Mikudeshes to me, you are Asur to everybody except for so-and-so, right? So therefore, Ruvain can say, Mikudeshes li, and you're asur to everybody except for my brother Shimon. My brother Shimon could still be Mekadesh you. So Baruvain v'kidsha chutz mi Shimon. So if Ruvain is Mekadesh Sarah, let's say, and she's asur to everybody except for his brother Shimon, uva Shimon, so now comes Shimon, v'kidsha chutz me Ruvain, and he's Mekadesher, and he says, you are Mekudesha to me, asur to everybody except for Ruvain. Umesu Shneim, and then both Ruvain and Shimon die. And now, right, they didn't have any children, and now there's Yibum with Levi. Now there's Yibum with Levi. So the shaila is, right, so we say Misyabemis LeLevi, there, right, Sarah would do Yibum with Levi. And I would not say that Yibum is cancelled because it's Eishes Shnei Amesim, right? There's a halacha that in order for Levi to do Yibum, Sarah would have to have Yibum only from one of the brothers, not from two of the brothers. And therefore the Havamina is to say, well, if Reuven was Mekadesher, and then Shimon was Mekadesher, and then they both died, so she was Mekudeshes to both of them, right? Because Reuven was Mekadesher except for Shimon. Shimon was Mekadesher except for Reuven. So you might think that she was Mekudeshes to both of them. And therefore, when they both die, the Yibum for Levi would be both from Reuven and Shimon. And we know that Yibum only comes from, if it's coming from one brother, but not from two brothers. So I might think that there should be no Yibum in this case, but we say, my time, how come there is Yibum? Kiddushe de Reuven ahanu. Kiddushe de Shimon lo ahanu. Because Reuven's Kiddushin accomplished something, Shimon's Reuven accomplished nothing. Meaning, Reuven was Mekadesher, and says, Ariat Mikudeshes li, and you're Asura and everybody except for Shimon. So now, all of a sudden, she's Asura and everybody except for Shimon. But when Shimon says, Haret Mekudesh Esli, and you're Asura to everybody except for Reuven, he didn't add anything. He added absolutely nothing. Right, Reuven had already said that she's Asura on everybody except for Shimon, which means that she's permitted to him, Reuven, as well as Shimon. Shimon says that she's Asura to everybody except for Reuven. Well, she was already Asura on everybody from Reuven's Kiddushin. And he's saying that she's permitted to Reuven, she was already permitted to Reuven. She's permitted to Shimon, she was already permitted to Shimon. So Shimon's Kiddushin didn't actually accomplish anything. And therefore when they both died, the fact that Shimon was Mekadesh is irrelevant. Only Reuven's Kiddushin matters. And therefore she does Yibum with Levi coming from the Kiddushin of Reuven. Right, so again, Kiddushay de Reuven Ahanu, Reuven's Kiddushin accomplished something to make her Asur on everybody, except for Shimon. Kiddushay de Shimon lo Ahanu, but Shimon's Kiddushin didn't actually accomplish anything. She was already Asur to everybody from Reuven's Kiddushin, and she was already Mutter to Reuven before, she was already permitted to him, Shimon, from before, so it didn't accomplish anything. So then what would be an example where she would be considered the wife of both of them, and Levi would not do Yibum? Well, if Reuven was Mekadesh was Mekadesh Sarah, and she's Asur to everybody except for Shimon, Uva Shimon v'Kidsha Stam. But now Shimon came and was Mekadesh her Stam. So she was already Asur to everybody, but now she's additionally Asur to Reuven now. The Kiddushay Reuven Ahanu L'Meisra Ha'alma, that when Reuven was Mekadesh her, he made her Asura to everybody except for Shimon. And now Shimon's Kiddushin worked in that it made her Asura to Reuven now, and right, in addition to everybody else. And now they both die, and the Kiddushin is coming from both, and the Yibum is coming from both Reuven and from Shimon, and Levi would not do Yibum in that. Right, so the Yibum was coming from both Reuven and Shimon, and Levi would not do Yibum in that case. Friends, for the rest of the daf, basically, it ends with the teku. So, go figure. Just a little bit of a heads up for what kind of stuff we're getting into for the next few minutes. So, Abaye asakasha, Omar Lo, a fellow says to his wife, Hariyat mutaris l'chol chutz Reuven v'Shimon. You're permitted to everybody, just not Reuven and Shimon. V'chazav Omar Lo l'Reuven v'Shimon. And then he says to Reuven and Shimon. So, what does it mean to Reuven and Shimon? Does it mean that, well, he initially said that you're permitted to everybody except Reuven and Shimon, and then when he says Reuven and Shimon, he's saying, you know what? You're even permitted to Reuven and Shimon also. Or maybe he's flipping it around. He's doing a switcheroo. What he's saying is, no, actually, you're permitted to Reuven and Shimon, but you're asura to everybody else. Meaning initially he said that you're permitted to everybody except Reuven and Shimon. Maybe what he's saying now is, no, you know what? Actually, you're permitted to Reuven and Shimon, but you're asura to everybody else. Okay? Who knows? Imtim tzalomar my da'asa shara. And if you're going to say, you know what he said was, initially he said you're permitted to everybody except Reuven and Shimon. And now he's saying, you know what? You're even permitted to Reuven and Shimon. Okay, fine. The Reuven ma, what if he just said to Reuven? The Reuven vuadin the Shimon? Does that mean you're permitted to Reuven and also Shimon? By the Kamar the Reuven Mishum de Pasach Bey? And the reason why he mentioned only Reuven and not Shimon is because that's what he started with. He mentioned Reuven first initially. Or Reuven Davka, maybe it just means Reuven, but she's still a surah to Shimon. Vimtim Tzalomar Reuven Davka. If you say it means just to Reuven, but she's still a surah to Shimon. The Shimon Mao, what if he just said to Shimon? The Shimon Vodin the Reuven, does that mean that you're now also permitted to Shimon and also Reuven? By the Kamar Shimon, the reason why I only mentioned Shimon Mishum de Salak Mine, because that's where that was the last thing that, Shimon was the last one that he had mentioned. Or maybe he's saying, no, you're only permitted to Shimon but not to Reuven. But Ravashi says, Af l'Shimon ma. What if he said even to Shimon? Af a Reuven kais? Is it saying Af even to Shimon means Reuven and even Shimon? Or Af or maybe it means no, to everybody and even Shimon but not Reuven. Take it, we say Ich weiß nicht. Okay. Friends, that was the Pebez of Masechta Gittin. We started the 9th and final parak of Masechta Gittin, which is very exciting because we're getting close to the end. We talk about a situation where a fellow divorces his wife and he says you're divorced from everybody except for Ploni. Rabbi Eliezer says it's okay. We brought psukim to explain why. The Chacham say it's not okay because we need a clean break. We said that the same machlokas also applies to Kiddushin, that if a fellow says you are Mikudeshes to me and Asura and everybody except for Ploni, Rav Eliezer says that would be okay, and the Chacham say it would not be okay, and that's because of the concept of Makish Avoya Liyitzia, that we compare Kiddushin to Gittin, right? Because it says V'yotzu mi beisov v'holcha v'hoisa li'ishacher, that we compare the leaving from the first husband to the getting married to the new guy, and therefore whatever the halachos would be by gerushin, we would apply to kiddushin as well. Friends, that was Daf Pei Beis of Masechta Gittin. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.